Chapter 1, The Whispered Scroll. The Vatican Library was a labyrinth of shadows at midnight, its endless shelves looming like silent sentinels over centuries of secrets. So Clara, a young nun barely into her second year of archival duties, moved cautiously through the aisles, her sandals whispering against the cold marble floor. The air was heavy with the musty scent of ancient parchment, mingled with the faint tang of melted candle wax. A single oil lamp in her hand cast flickering pools of light, painting the walls with wavering silhouettes that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking. Her task was mundane cataloging a forgotten crate of 15th century manuscripts, but tonight, the library felt alive, as though the very books were watching her. Clara's breath caught as her lamp illuminated a small, unremarkable wooden box tucked beneath a shelf, its surface caked with dust. Unlike the ornate reliquaries around it, this box bore no markings save for a faint, etched cross, its lines worn smooth by time. Curiosity tugged at her. She knelt, brushing away the grime, and pried open the lid with trembling fingers. Inside lay a single scroll, its edges brittle and yellowed, bound by a thin leather cord. The cord snapped at her touch, and as she unrolled the parchment, a chill crawled up her spine. The script was in Latin, penned in a hurried, jagged hand, and at its center was a phrase that made her pulse quicken: Maledictum sub Petra, the curse beneath the stone. Clara's eyes darted across the text. The scroll spoke of a crypt sealed beneath St. Peter's Basilica, a place where the roarer was bound by the first apostles to prevent a calamity foretold in a prophecy from 1472. The words were cryptic, laced with dread: "Let none disturb the stone, for the blood of the seeker shall unchain the wrath." Her fingers traced the ink, and for a moment, she swore the parchment pulsed beneath her touch, as if it carried a heartbeat of its own. She shook her head, dismissing the thought as exhaustion. She had been working late, and the library's oppressive silence often played tricks on the mind. But then she heard it, a whisper, soft and guttural, like a voice carried on a draft. It wasn't Latin or Italian, nor any language she recognized. It seemed to rise from the shelves themselves, curling around her like smoke. Clara, her name, spoken in a tone that was both plea and warning, sent a shiver through her. She spun around, holding the lamp aloft, but the aisle was empty. The shadows clung to the corners, thicker now, as if the light refused to penetrate them. Her heart thudded against her ribs. "Who's there?" she called, her voice swallowed by the vastness of the library. No answer came, only the echo of her words and the faint drip of wax from her lamp. Clara clutched the scroll, her rational mind urging her to return it to the box and forget it. The Vatican was a place of secrets, and she had been warned by her superior, Hong Y. Bellini, to avoid prying into matters beyond her station. Yet the phrase maledictum sub Petra burned in her thoughts, its weight pulling at her like a hook. What could be so dangerous that it was hidden beneath the heart of Christendom? And why did the scroll mention a key of blood? She slipped the parchment into her robes, extinguishing her lamp to hide her actions from any unseen eyes. The darkness enveloped her, and for a moment, she felt as though the library itself was holding its breath. As she navigated the labyrinthine corridors toward her quarters, the air grew colder, the scent of wax giving way to something older, earthier, like damp stone and decay. Passing a towering fresco of St. Peter holding his keys, Clara froze. The saint's painted eyes seemed to follow her, their gaze heavy with judgment. She quickened her pace, but the whisper returned, louder now, rising from the floor beneath her feet. It was no longer her name but a chant, a string of syllables that clawed at her nerves, ancient and alien. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound burrowed deeper, resonating in her chest like a second heartbeat. Clara stumbled into a side chapel, its walls adorned with mosaics of cherubim and seraphim. The flickering votive candles cast their wings in motion, as if they were straining to break free from the stone. She sank to her knees, clutching the scroll, and whispered a prayer for guidance. But the words felt hollow, drowned by the memory of the scroll's warning, "The blood of the seeker shall unchain the wrath." Had she already crossed a line by taking the scroll? Was the whisper a sign of something awakening, or was her mind unraveling in the midnight silence? A memory surfaced, sharp and unbidden. Months ago, during her training, an elderly archivist, so Teresa, had gripped her arm and hissed, "Some truths are better left buried, child. The Vatican guards more than relics." At the time, Clara had dismissed it as the ramblings of age, but now, with the scroll heavy in her robes and the whisper still echoing in her mind, she wasn't so sure. Teresa's eyes had held a fear that went beyond faith, a fear of something tangible, something beneath. Clara rose, her resolve hardening. She couldn't ignore this. The scroll was no mere artifact, it was a key to a truth the Church had hidden for centuries. But as she stepped back into the corridor, the whisper surged again, now a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the very walls. The floor beneath her trembled slightly, as if the stone itself were stirring. Clara's breath hitched. She clutched the cross at her neck, its edges biting into her palm, and made a silent vow: she would uncover what lay beneath St. Peter's, no matter the cost. What had she awakened by touching that scroll? And why did it feel as though the Vatican itself was watching her every move? Chapter 2, The Forbidden Verse. So Clara's quarters were a small, Spartan cell tucked deep within the Vatican's clergy dormitories, its stone walls bare except for a simple wooden crucifix above her narrow cot. The single window, high and leaded, let in slivers of moonlight that carved sharp shadows across the floor. She sat at a small desk, the stolen scroll unfurled before her, its brittle edges curling like the claws of some ancient beast. The oil lamp beside her sputtered, casting a warm but unsteady glow over the Latin text. Clara's hands trembled as she traced the jagged script, her lips moving silently as she translated, "Maledictum sub Petra." "The curse beneath the stone shall not be loosed, lest the roarer's wrath consume the holy city." The words felt alive, each syllable heavy with a dread that seeped into her bones. The scroll, dated 1472, bore the seal of a long-dead cardinal, its wax cracked but still bearing the faint imprint of a cross pierced by 3 droplets symbolizing blood, she realized with a shiver. The text spoke of a crypt beneath St. Peter's Basilica, sealed by the first apostles to contain a being known only as the Roarer, a force so terrible that its release would herald a calamity foretold in a lost prophecy. One line burned in her mind: "The key of blood shall break the seal, and the seeker's sacrifice shall awaken the storm." Clara's pulse quickened. A key of blood. What could it mean? A ritual? A relic? Or something far worse. She leaned closer, her breath stirring the parchment's dust. The air in her cell grew colder, the scent of stone and decay from the library lingering in her robes. She tried to focus, but the memory of that guttural whisper Clara echoed in her mind, as if the scroll itself had spoken her name. She glanced at the crucifix, seeking comfort, but its shadow seemed to twist in the lamplight, its arms bending unnaturally. Clara blinked hard, her rational mind insisting it was a trick of the light. She was a scholar, trained to decipher texts, not to indulge in superstition. Yet the scroll's words felt less like history and more like a warning meant for her. Her fingers brushed the parchment again, and the whisper returned, sharper this time, slicing through the silence like a blade. Seek not what lies beneath. The voice was low, layered, as if multiple speakers overlapped in a chorus of dread. Clara yanked her hand back, her lamp flickering as if caught in a sudden draft. The flame steadied, but the room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. She spun around, scanning the shadows. Nothing. Only the faint creak of the dormitory's ancient timbers and the distant toll of a bell marking the hour 2 in the morning. Her heart pounded, each beat a reminder of how alone she was. Clara forced herself to breathe, clutching the cross at her neck. She needed answers. Ignoring the unease crawling up her spine, she resumed translating, piecing together fragments of the scroll's cryptic narrative. It described a ritual performed by the apostles after Christ's death, a binding to imprison the roarer, a being that had defied divine order in the days before the flood. The scroll hinted at a betrayal, a guardian of mankind turned traitor, its compassion twisted into a curse. The final lines chilled her, beware the seeker who bears the key of blood, for their touch shall unravel the chains. As she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper, a shadow moved in the corner of her vision. Clara froze, her eyes darting to the far wall where the moonlight cast a jagged pattern. For a moment, she swore she saw a figure tall, indistinct, with eyes like burning coals watching her from the darkness. She blinked, and it was gone, leaving only the echo of her own ragged breathing. Her lamp flickered again, the flame dipping low, and the air grew heavy with the scent of iron, sharp and metallic, like blood. Clara's stomach twisted. She checked her hands, half expecting to see them stained red, but they were clean. The scroll, however, seemed darker now, its ink glistening as if freshly written. A knock at her door shattered the silence, sharp and insistent. Clara gasped, nearly knocking over the lamp. "Who's there?" she called, her voice cracking. No answer came, only another knock, slower this time, deliberate. She shoved the scroll under her desk, her hands trembling as she rose. The dormitory was restricted at this hour, no one should be here. She approached the door, her sandals scuffing against the stone, and pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. Then, faintly, the whisper returned, not from the room but from within the door itself, "The stone awaits." Clara stumbled back, her cross digging into her palm. She wanted to fling the door open, to confront whatever lurked beyond, but fear rooted her in place. The knock came again, 3 slow raps, each one heavier than the last. Her mind raced. Was it Hong Wai Bellini, suspicious of her late-night work? Or something else, something tied to the scroll. She glanced at the crucifix, whispering a prayer, but the words felt distant, as if they couldn't reach the heavens. The knocking stopped, replaced by a low scraping sound, like nails dragging across stone. Clara's breath hitched. She grabbed the lamp and held it high, its light barely piercing the shadows. The scraping grew louder, now coming from beneath the floor, as if something were clawing its way up from the earth. The temperature plummeted, her breath misting in the air. She backed toward the desk, her eyes locked on the floor where the moonlight pooled. The shadows there seemed to ripple, forming shapes, hands, faces, eyes before dissolving into nothing. Clara's resolve wavered, but the scroll's words echoed in her mind, "The Seeker's sacrifice shall awaken the storm." She couldn't turn back now. Whatever the roarer was, whatever the key of blood meant, she had to know. She retrieved the scroll, tucking it into her robes, and slipped out of her cell, avoiding the door where the knocking had come. The corridor outside was empty, but the air was thick, charged with an unseen presence. As she hurried toward the library, determined to cross-reference the scroll with other texts, a final whisper followed her, faint but unmistakable, "The blood is yours." Had she already crossed a forbidden threshold by reading the scroll's cursed words? Or was the Vatican itself hiding a truth too dangerous to face? What secrets do you think the Vatican is hiding beneath its stones? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to uncover the next chapter of this chilling tale. Chapter 3, Shadows in the Basilica. The vast nave of St. Peter's Basilica was a sea of darkness at midnight, its towering columns swallowed by shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. So Clara moved silently, her sandals barely whispering against the polished marble floor, the stolen scroll tucked tightly against her chest beneath her robes. The air was thick with the scent of incense and old stone, but tonight, it carried a faint undercurrent of something sharper, something like rusted iron or forgotten earth. Her oil lamp, clutched in one trembling hand, cast a frail halo of light, barely enough to illuminate the intricate mosaics overhead, where saints and angels stared down with unblinking eyes. Clara's heart thudded, each beat echoing the warning from the scroll, "The Seeker's sacrifice shall awaken the storm." She had no clear plan, only a burning need to find the crypt described in the scroll, the one sealed beneath the basilica, hiding the roarer. The library's texts had yielded no further clues, and the whisper that had followed her from her cell, "The blood is yours," had driven her here, to the heart of Christendom, where answers might lie. She paused beneath the baldacchino, its bronze canopy gleaming faintly in the lamplight, and scanned the vast floor for any sign of a hidden entrance. The scroll had mentioned a door marked by 3 drops of blood, but the basilica's expanse offered no obvious path. Clara's breath caught as a low, guttural sound rumbled through the silence, not unlike the growl of a distant beast. It came from beneath the floor, deep and resonant, vibrating through the solace of her sandals. She froze, her lamp trembling in her grip, casting wild shadows that danced across the marble. The sound faded, but the air grew heavier, as if the basilica itself were holding its breath. She whispered a prayer, her voice barely audible, but the words felt thin, as though the sacred space no longer listened. The saints in the mosaics above seemed to shift, their painted gazes sharpening, as if warning her to turn back. She pressed forward, driven by a mix of dread and determination, her lamp casting fleeting glimpses of gold and stone. Near the high altar, where the apostles' relics were said to rest, she noticed a small chapel tucked into a shadowed alcove. Its entrance was framed by a fresco of Saint Peter, his keys raised in judgment. Clara's pulse quickened. The fresco's colors were faded, but the saint's eyes seemed alive, glinting in the lamplight as if watching her every move. She approached, her fingers brushing the cold stone frame, and felt a faint seam, a hidden panel, perhaps. Her heart leapt. Could this be the door to the crypt? As she traced the seam, the rumble returned, louder now, a deep, throaty growl that seemed to claw its way up from the earth. The floor beneath her trembled, a subtle quake that sent dust sifting from the ceiling. Clara stumbled back, her lamp nearly slipping from her grasp. The fresco of Saint Peter seemed to ripple, as if the painted figure were stepping out of the wall. She blinked, her rational mind insisting it was an illusion, but the air grew colder, the scent of iron stronger, and the growl became a chorus of whispers, overlapping in a language she couldn't understand. Sanguis, Petra, Libratio, the words slithered through her mind, tugging at her like a current. Clara's hand tightened around her cross, its edges biting into her palm. She wanted to flee, to return to the safety of her cell, but the scroll's weight in her robes anchored her. She had to know what lay beneath. Swallowing her fear, she pressed against the fresco, searching for a latch. Her fingers found a small indentation, and with a soft click, a section of the wall shifted inward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was damp and ancient, carrying the stench of wet stone and something metallic, like blood left to pool. She hesitated, her lamp casting a weak glow down the steps. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of voices, some pleading, others menacing. "The stone awaits," the phrase from her cell echoed in her mind, mingling with the scroll's warning about the key of blood. Clara's skin prickled. She glanced back at the basilica, its vast emptiness now feeling like a trap, the shadows coiling tighter around her. The fresco of Saint Peter loomed above, and for a moment, she swore his keys twitched, as if unlocking something unseen. A memory flashed, so Teresa's warning months ago, "Some truths are better left buried, child." The old nun's eyes had held a terror that Clara now understood. But it was too late to turn back. She took a deep breath, crossed herself, and stepped onto the staircase. The stone was cold beneath her feet, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the confined space. The whispers followed, growing sharper, more insistent, as if guiding her deeper. Halfway down, the lamp's flame guttered, nearly extinguishing, and the air grew so thick it felt like breathing through cloth. At the foot of the stairs, Clara's light revealed a rough-hewn door of black stone, its surface carved with a symbol, a circle enclosing 3 crimson droplets, etched so deeply they seemed to glisten. Her breath caught. This was at the entrance to the crypt of the Roarer. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the symbol, when the growl erupted again, so loud it shook the walls, sending pebbles skittering across the floor. The whispers ceased, replaced by a single, resonant voice in her mind, "The blood is yours." Clara recoiled, her lamp trembling, casting wild shadows that seemed to form claws reaching from the walls. Had she already gone too far? Was the roarer already stirring, or was this a test of her faith? Can you guess what lies behind the crypt's door? Drop your theories below and hit that like button if you're ready for the next chilling reveal. Chapter 4, The Hidden Door. So Clara stood frozen at the foot of the narrow staircase, her oil lamp casting a trembling glow across the black stone door before her. The air in the confined passage was stifling, thick with the damp reek of ancient earth and a metallic tang that clung to the back of her throat. The door's surface, rough and cold, bore the carved symbol from the scroll, a circle enclosing 3 crimson droplets, their outlines glistening as if wet. The growl from moments before had faded, but its echo lingered in her bones, a primal warning that made her skin crawl. Yet the scroll's words, "The key of blood shall break the seal," pulsed in her mind, urging her forward despite the fear clawing at her chest. She raised her lamp, its light revealing faint scratches around the symbol, as if desperate hands had once clawed at the stone. The whispers that had haunted her in the basilica above were silent now, replaced by a heavy stillness that felt like the calm before a storm. Clara's fingers hovered over the crimson droplets, her cross necklace biting into her palm as she gripped it for courage. She didn't know what lay beyond the door, but the scroll's prophecy about the roarer being bound by the apostles to prevent a calamity demanded answers. She pressed her hand against the symbol, half expecting it to burn, but the stone was ice cold, unyielding. A sudden sting made her gasp. A jagged edge of the carving had sliced her fingertip, and a bead of blood welled up, dark and gleaming in the lamplight. Before she could pull back, the droplet fell, striking the center of the carved circle. The stone shuddered, a low groan reverberating through the passage, as if the earth itself were waking. Clara stumbled back, her lamp swaying, casting wild shadows that seemed to writhe like living things. The door's surface cracked, a thin fissure snaking outward from the bloodied symbol, and a faint red glow pulsed within, like a heartbeat trapped in stone. "Thou hast awakened me." The voice was not a whisper now but a deep, resonant hum that vibrated in her chest, speaking directly to her mind. It was ancient, layered with sorrow and fury, and it carried the weight of centuries. Clara's knees buckled, and she caught herself against the wall, her lamp nearly slipping from her grasp. The voice wasn't coming from the door but from within her, as if the roarer or whatever it was had latched onto her through that single drop of blood. Her finger throbbed, and she pressed it to her lips, tasting iron, her heart hammering as the red glow intensified. The door groaned again, shifting inward with a grinding screech, revealing a yawning darkness beyond. The air that spilled out was frigid, carrying a stench of decay so potent it made her gag. Clara raised her lamp, its light barely piercing the void, and saw a tunnel stretching downward, its walls etched with symbols Latin, Greek, and older scripts she couldn't decipher, spiraling into the depths like a warning. The scroll had called this the Crypt of the Roarer, a prison sealed by the apostles. But why blood? Why her blood? The voice's words echoed, "Thou hast awakened me." Had she already begun to unchain the curse? She took a hesitant step toward the threshold, her sandals crunching on loose pebbles. The tunnel seemed to pulse, its walls glistening as if coated in some unnatural moisture. A faint sound, like the drip of water, echoed from below, but it was too rhythmic, too deliberate, like footsteps pacing in the dark. Clara's breath misted in the cold, and she whispered a prayer, but the words felt hollow, drowned by the memory of Teresa's warning, "Some truths are better left buried." She wanted to turn back, to flee to the safety of the basilica above, but the scroll, still tucked in her robes, felt heavier now, as if it were anchoring her to this moment. A sudden gust snuffed her lamp, plunging the passage into darkness. Clara gasped, her hands fumbling to relight it, but the wick refused to catch. The blackness was absolute, pressing against her eyes, and the dripping sound grew louder, closer, now unmistakably footsteps. She clutched her cross, her only anchor, and whispered, "Who's there?" No answer came, but the air shifted, charged with a presence that made her skin prickle. Something was watching her, its gaze heavy, ancient, and unyielding. In a panic, she scraped a match against the wall, its flare revealing the tunnel for a fleeting moment. The walls were closer than before, their symbols glowing faintly red, as if her blood had ignited them. And there, at the edge of the light, was a shadow tall, formless, with eyes like smoldering embers, just as she'd seen in her cell. It didn't move, but its presence was a weight, a judgment. The match burned out, and the darkness returned, thicker now, alive with whispers that seemed to claw at her mind. "The blood is the key." Clara's hands shook as she relit the lamp, its weak flame barely holding the shadows at bay. The door stood open, the tunnel beckoning, but the voice's words rang in her ears, a promise, and a threat. She had spilled blood, and something had answered. Was it the roarer, stirring in its prison? Or something else, something older, waiting for her to take the next step? What would you do if you stood before an ancient door, knowing your blood could unlock it? Share your choice below and tap that subscribe button to follow Clara's descent into the abyss. Chapter 5, The Keeper's Warning. So Clara's hands trembled as she stumbled back up the narrow staircase from the crypt's threshold, the black stone door's crimson glow still burning in her mind. The air in St. Peter's Basilica felt oppressive now, the vast nave no longer a sanctuary but a maze of shadows that seemed to coil around her. The scroll, tucked tightly in her robes, pulsed with a weight that wasn't just physical, its words, "The blood is the key," echoing alongside the resonant voice that had spoken in her mind. Her finger, still stinging from the cut, throbbed as if it had its own heartbeat. She clutched her cross, its edges biting into her palm, and hurried toward the library, desperate to find answers before the Vatican's watchful eyes caught her. The library was silent, its towering shelves looming like silent judges in the pre-dawn gloom. Clara relit her oil lamp, its flame casting jagged shadows across the ancient manuscripts. She needed to cross-reference the scroll's prophecy, to understand what the roarer was and why her blood had awakened it. As she scanned the indices for texts on apostolic rituals, a sharp voice cut through the silence. "So Clara, what brings you here at this hour?" She spun around, her lamp nearly toppling. Hong Wai Bellini stood in the doorway, his red robes a stark contrast to the library's muted tones. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, pinned her in place, and for a moment, she swore they glinted with something more than suspicion, something like fear. "Your Eminence," Clara stammered, tucking her bleeding finger behind her back. I was cataloging some texts. I couldn't sleep." The light felt thin, and Bellini's gaze lingered on her, as if he could see the scroll hidden beneath her robes. "You've been restless lately," he said, stepping closer, his voice low and measured. "The library is no place for idle curiosity, especially not in the dead of night." He paused, his fingers brushing a nearby shelf, and Clara noticed a faint tremor in his hand. "Some truths are not meant for us, Clara. The Vatican guards secrets older than Rome itself, secrets that protect the faithful." His words echoed so Teresa's warning, but there was an edge to them, a warning wrapped in authority. Clara's throat tightened. Did he know about the scroll? About the crypt? She forced a nod, her heart pounding. "I understand, Your Eminence. I only seek to serve." Bellini's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she thought he might press further, but he turned away, his robes whispering against the marble. "Return to your quarters," he said without looking back. "And leave the shadows to those who know how to keep them." As his footsteps faded, Clara exhaled, her knees weak. She knew she should obey, but the scroll's words burned in her mind, and the memory of that voice, "Thou hast awakened me," urged her to dig deeper. She slipped into a secluded alcove, pulling a dusty tome from the shelf, Annals Apostolorum, a 15th century record of early Christian rites. Its pages were brittle, the Latin dense, but as she schemed, she found a passage that made her blood run cold. It described a ritual performed by the apostles in the catacombs beneath Rome, a binding to seal a traitor of heaven called the Roarer, whose voice could shatter stone and summon storms. The passage ended with a chilling note: "Only the blood of the chosen shall loose its chains, and the world shall tremble." Clara's finger throbbed, and she glanced at it, the cut now crusted but still raw. Was she the chosen? The thought was absurd, yet the scroll had reacted to her blood, and the voice had spoken her name. She flipped to another page, finding a sketch of a circle with 3 crimson droplets, the same symbol on the crypt's door. Beside it was a warning: "Let no seeker disturb the stone, for the Roarer's wrath heralds the end." The text hinted at a relic, a key of blood, hidden somewhere in the Vatican, but its location was obscured, replaced by a cryptic reference to the Martyr's Rest. A faint creak broke her focus. Clara froze, her lamp's light catching a shadow moving across the shelves, not a person, but something formless, like smoke curling in the air. The temperature plummeted, her breath misting, and the scent of iron returned, sharp and suffocating. She clutched the tome, her eyes darting to the alcove's entrance. Nothing. But the shadow lingered at the edge of her vision, its edges pulsing as if alive. The whispers came again, softer now, a chorus of voices weaving through the shelves: the key, the blood, the storm. Clara's heart raced. She shoved the tome back onto the shelf, her hands shaking, and tucked the scroll deeper into her robes. She needed to find the Martyr's Rest, wherever it was, but Bellini's warning echoed in her mind. Was he protecting her, or hiding something? The shadow moved again, closer now, and Clara swore she saw eyes red, unblinking, like embers in the dark. She backed toward the library's exit, her lamp flickering as if struggling to stay alight. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the floor beneath her vibrated, a faint tremor that stirred dust from the ceiling. She fled the library, the shadows seeming to chase her, their edges clawing at the edges of her light. As she reached the corridor, a final whisper followed, sharp and clear, "The blood of the seeker will open the abyss." Clara stumbled, catching herself against a wall, her lamp casting a fleeting glow on a fresco of a martyr, his chest pierced by 3 arrows, blood dripping in a pattern eerily similar to the crypt's symbol. Her breath caught. Was this the martyr's rest? And what would happen if she followed its trail? If you found a clue to a forbidden secret, would you keep searching or walk away? Drop your answer below and share this tale with someone who loves a good mystery. Chapter 6, The Descent. So Clara stood at the edge of the open crypt door, the scroll's weight in her robes a constant reminder of the line she'd crossed. The air beyond the black stone threshold was thick, saturated with the scent of wet earth and something sharper, like charred bone. Her oil lamp flickered, its flame bending as if drawn toward the darkness below, casting a dim glow on the staircase slick steps. The crimson droplet symbol on the door pulsed faintly, as if her blood, spilled in that fleeting cut, had left a living mark. The words from the Annals Apostolorum, "Only the blood of the chosen shall loose its chains," echoed in her mind, but now they were joined by Hong Wai Bellini's warning, "Leave the shadows to those who know how to keep them." Yet Clara couldn't turn back. The roarer, whatever it was, had called to her, and she had answered. She descended, each step a plunge into colder air, the walls closing in like the ribs of some ancient beast. The staircase spiraled deeper than she'd expected, its stones worn smooth, as if countless feet had trodden this path before her. Her lamp's light caught glints of mica in the rock, sparkling like stars in a buried sky, but the beauty was fleeting, overshadowed by a growing pressure in her chest, a sense of being watched, not by eyes but by the stone itself. The scroll had spoken of a crypt sealed by the apostles, a prison for a traitor of heaven. Clara's cut finger throbbed, and she wondered if her blood had already begun to unravel its chains. The staircase ended at a low archway, its keystone etched with a faint, unfamiliar rune, a jagged spiral that seemed to writhe under her gaze. Beyond it lay a tunnel, its walls not carved but melted, as if scorched by an unearthly heat. The air was heavy, humid, carrying a faint hum, like the drone of a distant hive. Clara's sandals sank into the floor, which was soft, almost spongy, and left faint impressions that filled with a dark, viscous liquid. She recoiled, her lamp revealing the liquid's slow seep, as if the tunnel were bleeding. Her breath quickened, the hum growing louder, vibrating through her bones like a tuning fork. She pressed forward, driven by a need she couldn't name, her lamp casting light on a series of alcoves along the tunnel. Each held a relic, a rusted chalice, a fractured bone, a tattered cloth arranged like offerings on forgotten altars. Clara's fingers brushed one, a small silver ring engraved with 3 droplets, and a jolt shot through her, sharp and electric. Her vision blurred, and a memory not her own flooded her mind, a circle of robed figures, their faces obscured, chanting in a tongue that burned her ears. They stood around a writhing mass of shadow, its form vast and indistinct, its roar shaking the earth. One figure raised a blade, blood dripping onto stone, and the mass stilled, bound by chains of light. Clara gasped, pulling her hand back, the ring clattering to the floor. The vision faded, but the hum in the air intensified, now a low, rhythmic pulse that matched her heartbeat. The tunnel seemed to shift, its walls contracting slightly, as if breathing. She clutched her cross, its edges grounding her, and whispered a prayer, but the words dissolved into the hum, powerless. The scroll's prophecy, the seeker's sacrifice shall awaken the storm, felt like a brand on her soul. Had the ring triggered that vision? Was it part of the key of blood? The tunnel widened into a circular chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor etched with a massive spiral rune, identical to the one on the archway. At its center stood a pillar of black stone, waist-high, its surface smooth except for a shallow basin, stained dark with what could only be blood. Clara approached, her lamp trembling, and saw faint scratches around the basin, marks of desperation, as if someone had tried to claw it open. The hum was deafening now, a chorus of vibrations that seemed to emanate from the pillar itself. She reached out, her cut finger hovering over the basin, when the air grew heavy, pressing her down like a physical weight. Without warning, the liquid in the floor surged, rising in thin tendrils that coiled around her ankles, cold and slick. Clara yelped, stumbling back, but the tendrils tightened, pulling her toward the pillar. Her lamp fell, its flame sizzling out in the liquid, plunging the chamber into near darkness, lit only by a faint red glow from the rune. The hum became a voice not in her mind but in the air, a low growl that shook the walls. The key is blood, the storm is near. Clara's heart pounded, her cross slipping from her fingers as she fought the tendrils, their grip like iron. A memory flashed again, unbidden, her childhood, a nightmare of a shadowed figure with burning eyes, whispering her name in a church's pews. She'd dismissed it as a dream, but now it felt real, tied to this place, this moment. The tendrils loosened, and Clara scrambled free, her breath ragged. The pillar's basin glowed brighter, its stains glistening as if fresh. Had her blood already begun to unlock the Rora's prison, or was this chamber a trap, testing her resolve? If a relic showed you a vision of an ancient ritual, would you trust it or fear it? Share your thoughts below and tap that like button to keep unraveling this mystery. Chapter 7, The Rora's Prison. So Clara's heart pounded as she stood before the blood-stained basin in the crypt's chamber, the faint red glow of the spiral rune pulsing beneath her feet like a living wound. The air was thick, humid, and laced with the acrid scent of charred bone, as if the tunnel itself had been scorched by some ancient fire. The tendrils of dark liquid that had gripped her ankles moments ago had retreated, leaving her skin cold and slick, but the hum in the chamber lingered, a low vibration that seemed to emanate from the black stone pillar at its center. Her fallen lamp lay shattered, its oil seeping into the floor, but the rune's glow provided just enough light to reveal the chamber's details, walls etched with frantic carvings of robed figures, their hands raised against a shadowy mass, and the pillar, its basin now shimmering as if her touch had awakened it. Clara's cut finger throbbed, a reminder of the scroll's warning, the blood of the chosen shall loose its chains. The vision from the silver ring-robed apostles binding a writhing, roaring entity still burned in her mind, its images sharp and alien, as if planted there by something beyond her. She stepped closer to the pillar, her sandals sticking to the floor's unnatural softness, and noticed a faint inscription circling the basin, barely legible in the dim light. The words were in an ancient script, not Latin but something older, their jagged lines curling like thorns. She traced them with a trembling finger, and a jolt of heat surged through her, not painful but alive, as if the stone were drawing her in. The chamber quaked, a sudden tremor that sent dust raining from the unseen ceiling. Clara steadied herself against the pillar, her hands slipping into the basin. The stone was warm now, almost pulsing, and the inscription flared, its letters glowing like molten iron. A sound erupted, not a whisper or growl, but a deep, resonant crack, like the splitting of a glacier. The basin split open, revealing a hidden compartment within the pillar, and from it emerged a faint glint of metal. Clara's breath caught as she reached inside, her fingers closing around a small, heavy object, a silver amulet, shaped like a crescent moon, its surface engraved with 3 crimson droplets that seemed to shimmer with their own light. This was it, the key of blood the scroll had described. The moment she lifted the amulet, the chamber's hum crescendoed into a deafening roar, not in her mind but in the air, shaking the walls and floor. Clara stumbled back, clutching the amulet, as the carvings on the walls seemed to come alive, the apostles' faces twisting into silent screams, their hands clawing at the shadowy mass. The rune on the floor blazed brighter, its red light casting grotesque shadows that danced like a storm of specters. Clara's vision blurred, and another memory not her own flooded her, a cavern beneath Rome, lit by torches, where apostles chanted over a stone sarcophagus, their voices trembling as they sealed a being that thrashed within, its roar shaking the earth. Blood dripped from their hands, sealing the ritual, and a voice, her voice, whispered, "The storm is bound, but not forever." The vision snapped shut, leaving Clara gasping, the amulet hot in her hand. The roar faded, but the chamber felt different now, as if the air had thickened with intent. The pillar's basin was empty, but the floor beneath it cracked, a jagged fissure snaking outward, releasing a faint wisp of black smoke that curled upward like a living thing. Clara's heart raced. Had she unlocked something, or merely stirred it? The amulet pulsed, its warmth spreading through her palm, and for a moment, she swore she felt a heartbeat within it, synchronized with her own. She tucked the amulet into her robes, next to the scroll, and turned to leave, but the chamber quaked again, harder this time, and a low, guttural sound like the grinding of stone on stone echoed from the fissure. It wasn't a voice but a presence, vast and ancient, stirring in the depths. Clara's cross felt heavy around her neck, its weight pulling her toward the exit, but her feet were rooted, caught between fear and a strange, magnetic pull. The apostles' carvings seemed to watch her, their eyes glinting in the rune's light, as if judging her for taking the amulet. A sudden gust of wind, impossible in the sealed chamber, whipped through the air, carrying the scent of ash and blood. The fissure widened, and the smoke thickened, forming shapes, limbs, wings, eyes that dissolved before Clara could make sense of them. The roar returned, not loud but deep, resonating in her chest like a second pulse. She clutched the amulet, its heat now almost burning, and backed toward the tunnel's entrance. The carvings shifted again, the shadowy mass now seeming to break free, its form spilling across the walls like ink. Clara turned to flee, but the floor beneath her buckled, throwing her to her knees. The amulet slipped from her hand, skittering across the stone, and the roar became a scream, a sound so raw it seemed to tear at the fabric of the chamber. She scrambled for the amulet, her fingers closing around it just as the fissure erupted, a blast of cold air and smoke engulfing her. The scream faded, but the chamber was alive now, the walls pulsing, the rune blazing, as if the roarer itself were clawing its way to the surface. Had she freed it, or was this only the beginning of its awakening? If you held an amulet that could unleash an ancient force, would you keep it or destroy it? Drop your choice in the comments and share this story to see what others think. Chapter 8, The First Sacrifice. So Clara clutched the silver amulet, its crescent shape burning against her palm as she stumbled back through the tunnel, away from the quaking chamber and its roaring fissure. The air was thick with the stench of ash and blood, the walls pulsing with a faint red glow that seemed to follow her, as if the crypt itself were alive. Her robes were damp with sweat and the strange, viscous liquid from the chamber's floor, and her cut finger throbbed, each pulse a reminder of the scroll's warning, "The blood of the chosen shall loose its chains." The amulet, the key of blood, felt alive in her hand, its engraved droplets glinting as if they could bleed. The roar from the chamber had faded, but its echo lingered in her bones, a primal force that urged her to run yet held her in its grip. She emerged into the narrow staircase leading back to St. Peter's Basilica, her breath ragged, the darkness pressing in like a living thing. The spiral rune's glow had dimmed, but the air remained heavy, charged with an unseen presence. Clara's sandals slipped on the slick steps, and she caught herself against the wall, her fingers brushing a crude depiction of a figure with wings of shadow, its mouth open in a silent scream. The image sent a chill through her, its resemblance to the roarer's form in her visions too stark to ignore. She hurried upward, the amulet's heat spreading through her chest, as if it were trying to merge with her heartbeat. As she reached the basilica's hidden chapel, the fresco of St. Peter loomed above, its keys glinting in the faint moonlight that seeped through a high window. Clara paused, catching her breath, when a voice called out, soft but urgent. "Clara? Is that you?" She spun, her heart leaping, and saw Father Luca, a young priest who had trained alongside her in the Vatican archives. His face was pale, his eyes wide with concern as he stepped from the shadows, a small lantern in his hand. "What are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I saw you leave the dormitory. I was worried." Clara's grip tightened on the amulet, hidden in her robes. Luca was a friend, one of the few who shared her curiosity about the Vatican's secrets, but Bellini's warning echoed in her mind, "Leave the shadows to those who know how to keep them." Could she trust him? "I needed to pray," she lied, her voice unsteady. "The basilica calms me." Luca's brow furrowed, his gaze flicking to her disheveled robes and the faint blood stain on her hand. "You're hurt," he said, stepping closer. "And you look scared." Before she could respond, the basilica quaked, a low rumble that sent dust sifting from the ceiling. The fresco of St. Peter seemed to shudder, its keys rattling faintly, as if the saint himself were stirring. Luca grabbed her arm, his lantern swinging wildly. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Clara's heart raced. The roar from the crypt echoed in her mind, and she realized with a jolt that the amulet was growing hotter, its heat pulsing in time with the tremor. "We need to leave," she said, pulling him toward the nave, but the air grew colder, the scent of charred bone intensifying. A sudden gust whipped through the chapel, snuffing Luca's lantern and plunging them into darkness. Clara's breath caught, her hand fumbling for her cross, but the amulet burned against her skin, its glow seeping through her robes, casting a faint red light. Luca gasped, his eyes fixed on the amulet. "What is that?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Before Clara could answer, a shadow surged from the chapel's corner, not a formless mass but a coiling tendril of darkness, its edges sharp and glistening, like obsidian blades. It moved with purpose, slashing through the air toward Luca. "Run!" Clara screamed, shoving him toward the nave. But the tendril was faster, wrapping around Luca's ankle and yanking him to the floor. He cried out, clawing at the marble, his lantern shattering as the shadow dragged him toward the hidden staircase. Clara lunged, grabbing his hand, but the tendril's grip was iron, its surface cold and slick, like the liquid from the crypt. "Clara, help!" Luca's voice was a desperate plea, his eyes wide with terror as the shadow pulled him into the darkness of the stairwell. Clara's fingers slipped, and Luca vanished, his scream echoing from below, swallowed by a guttural roar that shook the basilica. The fresco of St. Peter seemed to watch, its keys now still, as if approving the sacrifice. Clara staggered back, the amulet searing her hand, its light pulsing faster, as if feeding on Luca's fate. The roar grew louder, a sound of triumph and hunger, and the floor beneath her cracked, a thin fissure snaking toward the altar. Black smoke curled from it, carrying the stench of blood and ash, and Clara realized with horror that the roarer needed more blood, more sacrifice to fully break free. She clutched the amulet, its heat now unbearable, and ran toward the nave, the basilica's columns looming like silent witnesses. Luca's scream echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the cost of her curiosity. Had she doomed him by bringing the amulet to the surface? Or was this the roarer's way of claiming its key? What would you sacrifice to uncover a hidden truth? Share your thoughts below and hit that subscribe button to see what Clara faces next. Chapter 9, The Prophecy Revealed. So Clara's heart thundered as she stumbled through the darkened nave of St. Peter's Basilica, the silver amulet searing her palm like a brand. The echo of Father Luca's scream still rang in her ears, a haunting reminder of the shadow tendril that had dragged him into the crypt's depths. The air was thick with the acrid stench of ash and blood, and the faint tremors beneath her feet hadn't ceased, as if the basilica itself were shuddering in response to the roarer's stirring. The scroll, tucked tightly in her robes, felt heavier now, its words, "The blood of the chosen shall loose its chains," a curse she couldn't escape. Her cut finger pulsed, and the amulet's crimson droplets glowed faintly, as if feeding on her fear. She needed answers, not just about the roarer but about what had taken Luca. The basilica's vastness felt suffocating, its columns looming like silent sentinels, their shadows twisting in the moonlight that filtered through shattered stained glass windows. Clara hurried toward the Vatican library, her sandals slapping against the marble, driven by a desperate need to uncover the truth before the crypt's power claimed her too. The amulet's heat was relentless, its pulse syncing with her own, as if it were alive, urging her deeper into the mystery. The library was a maze of silence, its shelves towering like ancient trees, their manuscripts whispering secrets in the dark. Clara's lamp was gone, lost in the crypt, but a single candle from a nearby shrine cast a wavering glow, barely enough to navigate the aisles. She headed for the restricted section, where forbidden texts were kept under lock and key. Her fingers fumbled with a stolen key taken from an archivist's desk months ago, a small rebellion she'd never admitted, and opened a heavy iron grate. Inside, she found a tome bound in cracked leather, its cover embossed with a spiral rune identical to the one in the crypt. The title, Prophetia Umbri, sent a chill through her, its Latin promising prophecies of the shadow. Clara opened the book, its pages yellowed and brittle, releasing a faint scent of mildew and iron. The text, written in a mix of Latin and an older script, detailed a prophecy from the 1st century, penned by an unnamed apostle. It spoke of the Roarer, a guardian of mankind who had defied divine will by teaching forbidden truths before the flood. The apostles, fearing its power, had bound it beneath Rome, using a ritual of blood and relics to seal its prison. The prophecy warned, the Roarer's voice shall shake the heavens, and its freedom shall herald the storm of the end. Clara's breath caught as she read a final line, the key of blood, borne by the chosen, shall either bind or break the chains, and the sacrifice shall decide. Her hand trembled, the amulet's glow casting eerie shadows on the pages. The prophecy confirmed what she'd feared, her blood had begun to unlock the Roarer's prison, and Luca's disappearance was the first sacrifice. But the text also hinted at a choice to bind or free the entity. Clara's mind raced. Could she reverse what she'd started? Or was she doomed to unleash the storm? She flipped to a sketch in the tome, a crescent amulet, identical to the one in her hand, surrounded by 3 droplets of blood. Below it, a note in a later hand dated 1472, the same year as the scroll read, "The amulet is the key, hidden in the martyr's rest, but beware, for the Roarer's truth is a lie." A sudden creak shattered the silence, and Clara's candle flickered, nearly extinguishing. She spun, her heart leaping, and saw 3 figures emerge from the shadows, robed men, their faces obscured by deep hoods, their movements silent and deliberate. The air grew colder, the scent of iron intensifying, and Clara clutched the amulet, its heat now a burning pain. "So Clara," the lead figure said, his voice low and commanding, tinged with an accent she couldn't place. "You hold the key of blood. Surrender it, and you may yet be spared." Clara backed against the shelf, the tome slipping from her hands. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The man stepped closer, his hood revealing only a glint of eyes, cold and unyielding. "We are the Custodes Umbri, keepers of the shadow," he said. "The Roarer must remain bound, and you have gone too far." His hand extended, revealing a silver dagger etched with the same spiral rune. Clara's pulse raced. The prophecy's warning echoed, "The sacrifice shall decide." Was she to be the next offering? The candle's flame surged, casting wild shadows that seemed to writhe on the walls, forming shapes of wings and eyes. The air vibrated with a low hum, not unlike the Roarer's roar, and the shelves rattled, books tumbling to the floor. The hooded men froze, their eyes darting to the shadows, and Clara seized the moment, bolting toward the library's exit. The men gave chase, their footsteps eerily silent, and the hum grew louder, as if the Roarer itself were stirring in response to the amulet's presence. Clara's hand tightened around the key, its heat now afire in her veins. Had she already chosen to free the roarer, or could she still bind it before it claimed another life? If you were hunted by secret keepers, would you fight or flee? Drop your choice in the comments and share this chilling tale to see how others would face the shadows. Chapter 10, Betrayal in the Shadows. The Vatican's undercroft was a labyrinth of damp stone and flickering torchlight, its air heavy with the scent of mildew and ancient secrets. The custodes umbri, the hooded keepers of the shadow, moved like specters through the narrow corridors, their robes whispering against the walls as they pursued their quarry. Their leader, a gaunt figure whose silver dagger glinted with the same spiral rune as the forbidden tome, paused at a junction, his head tilting as if sensing a disturbance in the air. The amulet, the key of blood, was close, its presence a pulse that vibrated through the stone, stirring the roarer in its prison below. The keeper's mission was clear: retrieve the key, seal the crypt, and silence the one who had dared to disturb it. The undercroft's walls were lined with ancient niches, each holding relics of forgotten saints' bones, vials of dust, tattered shrouds arranged as if to ward off the darkness below. The lead keeper, known only as Frater Umber among his order, raised a hand, signaling his two companions to halt. The air was wrong, charged with a static hum that prickled his skin, and the torches flickered, casting shadows that seemed to writhe with unnatural life. Umber's eyes, hidden beneath his hood, narrowed as he traced a rune on the wall, its lines glowing faintly red before fading. The roarer was stirring, its power seeping through the cracks Clara had unwittingly opened with her blood. A faint clatter echoed from a side passage, sharp and out of place in the undercroft's oppressive silence. Umber gestured, and the keepers moved swiftly, their daggers drawn, their steps silent despite the weight of their robes. The passage opened into a small chamber, its walls etched with faded frescoes of apostles binding a shadowed figure, its eyes blazing like twin suns. At the chamber's center, a pile of scattered manuscripts lay strewn across the floor, their pages torn as if by desperate hands. Umber knelt, his fingers brushing a bloodied fingerprint on a parchment, a trace of Clara, the seeker who had taken the amulet. "She's here," Umber whispered, his voice a low rasp, like stone grinding against stone. "The key is with her." His companion, a younger keeper named Frater Lumen, shifted uneasily, his dagger trembling in his hand. "The prophecy warned of the chosen," Lumen said, his voice barely audible. "If she uses the amulet," Umber silenced him with a glare. "She will not. The roarer must remain bound, as it has for centuries. The blood of the chosen is ours to spill." The chamber quaked, a sudden tremor that sent dust cascading from the ceiling. The frescoes seemed to ripple, the shadowed figure's eyes flaring brighter, as if the roarer itself were watching. Umber's rune flickered again, its light pulsing in time with the tremor, and a low hum filled the air, not a roar but a chant, ancient and guttural, rising from the stone. The keepers froze, their daggers raised, as the hum grew louder, forming words in a tongue older than Rome: sanguis, libratio, tempestas, blood, freedom, storm. Umber's heart quickened. The amulet was close, its power amplifying the roarer's voice. A shadow darted across the chamber's edge, swift and fleeting, not one of their own. Umber spun, his dagger slicing through the air, but it met only stone. Clara emerged from a hidden alcove, her robes torn, the amulet clutched in her bloodied hand, its crimson droplets glowing like embers. Her eyes were wide, not with fear but with defiance, as if the roarer's call had steeled her resolve. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice echoing in the confined space. "I know what you are. You're not protecting the faithful, you're hiding the truth." Umber stepped forward, his dagger gleaming. "The truth is a poison, child," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. "The roarer is no savior. It defied the heavens, and its freedom will bring only ruin. Give us the amulet, or your blood will seal its prison." Clara backed away, her hand tightening around the amulet, its heat pulsing through her veins. The frescoes shuddered, their colors bleeding into the stone, as if the roarer's shadow were breaking free. The chamber quaked again, harder now, and a crack split the floor, releasing a thin wisp of black smoke that coiled upward, forming shapes: claws, wings, eyes that dissolved into the air. The chant grew louder, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves, urging Clara to act. She glanced at the amulet, its glow now blinding, and a vision flashed through her mind, not a memory but a glimpse of a future, a city in flames, the roarer towering above, its voice shaking the heavens. Was this the storm the prophecy foretold, or a lie to scare her into submission? Clara bolted, dodging Lumen's dagger as she dove into a side passage. The keepers gave chase, their robes flowing like shadows, their runes glowing brighter as the roarer's chant intensified. The passage narrowed, its walls closing in, and Clara's breath came in ragged gasps. The amulet burned, its pulse a drum beat in her chest, urging her to keep running. But the passage ended abruptly, a dead end sealed by a stone wall etched with a single rune, a spiral, pulsing red, identical to the amulet's design. The keeper's footsteps closed in, their daggers glinting, and the chant became a roar, shaking the undercroft. Had Clara trapped herself, or had the roarer guided her to this moment? If you were cornered by secret keepers guarding a forbidden truth, what would you do to escape? Share your strategy in the comments and tap that like button to keep this mystery unfolding. Chapter 11, The Blood Ritual. The dead-end chamber in the Vatican's undercroft pulsed with a crimson glow, the spiral rune on the stone wall flaring like a wound in the earth. So Clara stood trapped, her back pressed against the cold stone, the silver amulet clutched in her trembling hand. Its crescent shape burned, the engraved droplets glinting as if alive, sinking with the rapid thud of her heart. The air was thick with the stench of ash and iron, and the low hum from the crypt below had become a resonant chant, its ancient syllables vibrating through the walls: sanguis, libratio, tempestas. The footsteps of the custodes umbri echoed closer, their daggers glinting in the rune's light, but the chamber felt alive, as if the roarer itself were stirring, drawn by the amulet's power. Clara's cut finger throbbed, the dried blood cracking as she gripped the amulet tighter. The prophecy from the Prophetia Umbri echoed in her mind: the key of blood, borne by the chosen, shall either bind or break the chains. She had no time to think. Frater Umber's voice cut through the chant, cold and commanding. "Surrender the key, Clara," he said, stepping into the chamber, his hooded figure flanked by Lumen and a third keeper, their daggers raised. "Your blood has already done enough damage. The rune on the wall pulsed brighter, and the floor trembled, a faint crack snaking toward Clara's feet. She glanced at the amulet, its glow now blinding, and a sudden heat surged through her, not from the metal but from within, as if her blood were answering the chant. The air shimmered, and the chamber's walls seemed to melt, revealing glimpses of a vast, shadowed cavern where a colossal figure loomed, its form indistinct, its eyes twin infernos, its wings of shadow spanning the void. The roarer. Clara's breath caught, her vision blurring as the figure spoke, not in words but in a wave of emotion, sorrow, rage, and a desperate yearning for freedom. Thou art the key, complete the ritual. The vision snapped shut, and Clara stumbled, her bloodied finger brushing the rune on the wall. The stone flared, and a jolt shot through her, her blood smearing across the spiral. The chamber quaked, the crack in the floor widening, and black smoke poured out, curling into shapes, hands, faces, claws that reached for her. Umber lunged, his dagger slashing toward her, but the smoke coiled around him, slowing his strike. Fool, he hissed. You're awakening it. Clara dodged, her robes tearing as she scrambled to the chamber's center, where a shallow basin, identical to the one in the crypt, was etched into the floor. The chant grew deafening, the walls vibrating as if the roarer were clawing its way up. Clara's hand shook as she raised the amulet, its glow illuminating the basin, which was stained dark with ancient blood. The prophecy's words surged, the sacrifice shall decide. Her blood had opened the crypt, taken Luca, and now it called to the roarer. She pressed her cut finger to the amulet, and a single drop fell into the basin. The chamber erupted in a blinding flash, the rune's light consuming the shadows, and the roarer's form materialized not in a vision but in the air before her, towering and radiant, its eyes red as molten iron, its wings a storm of darkness that filled the chamber. Who are you? Clara whispered, her voice trembling with awe and terror. The roarer's gaze pinned her, its presence a weight that threatened to crush her. Its voice, a deep rumble that shook the stone, spoke in her mind, I was the guardian of your kind, betrayed for my compassion, bound by those who feared truth. Free me, or bind me, but choose now, for the storm is upon us. The smoke swirled, forming a vortex around the basin, and Clara felt her blood burn, as if the roarer were drawing it out, demanding more. Umber broke free of the smoke, his dagger raised, but the roarer's wings swept forward, knocking him against the wall. Lumen and the third keeper froze, their runes flickering as the chant reached a fever pitch. Clara's hand hovered over the basin, the amulet pulsing in time with her heart. The prophecy offered a choice, bind or free, but the roarer's sorrow was palpable, its story of betrayal echoing her own doubts about the church. Yet Luca's scream haunted her, a warning of the cost. She pressed the amulet into the basin, her blood smearing the stone, and the chamber roared, the fissure splitting wider, releasing a torrent of smoke and light. The roarer's form grew clearer, its wings unfurling, its eyes blazing with a mix of gratitude and wrath. Umber staggered to his feet, shouting, "Stop her! She'll doom us all." But the smoke enveloped him, and his scream was cut short, swallowed by the roarer's roar. Clara's vision blurred, the chamber spinning as the ritual reached its climax. Had she chosen freedom, or had the roarer chosen her? If you faced a being that could be savior or destroyer, what choice would you make? Share your decision in the comments and tap that share button to spread this epic tale. Chapter 12, The Vatican's Wrath. The undercroft chamber trembled as the roarer's radiant form vanished into a vortex of black smoke, leaving Clara sprawled on the cracked stone floor, the silver amulet still clutched in her bloodied hand. The air was thick with the stench of ash and sulfur, the walls pulsing with the fading echo of the entity's roar. The basin at the chamber's center lay shattered, its crimson-stained shards scattered like broken bones, and the spiral rune on the wall flickered, its glow dimming as if exhausted. Clara's heart pounded, the prophecy's words, "The sacrifice shall decide," ringing in her ears. She had pressed the amulet into the basin, her blood sealing the ritual, but whether she had freed or bound the roarer remained unclear. The chamber felt empty, yet the weight of its presence lingered, as if the entity were watching from beyond the stone. Footsteps echoed from the passage, sharp and urgent, breaking the oppressive silence. Clara scrambled to her feet, tucking the amulet into her robes, its heat now a dull warmth against her chest. The custodes Umbri had not given up. Frater Lumen, the younger keeper, emerged first, his hood thrown back, revealing a face pale with fear and fury. Behind him came a new figure, a robed woman with eyes like polished obsidian, her silver dagger etched with the same spiral rune. "You've gone too far, Seeker," she said, her voice cold and precise, like a blade slicing through silk. "The roarer's chains are weakening, and your blood is to blame." Clara backed toward the chamber's cracked wall, her breath ragged. "I didn't mean to free it," she stammered, her hand tightening around the amulet. "I only wanted the truth." The woman's lips curled into a humorless smile. "The truth is a fire that burns the unworthy," she said, raising her dagger. "The custodes will bind the roarer again, and your life will be the seal." Lumen hesitated, his eyes darting to the fissure in the floor, where faint wisps of smoke still curled upward, carrying the scent of blood and decay. The chamber quaked, a violent tremor that sent stones tumbling from the ceiling. The rune flared again, its light pulsing in time with Clara's heartbeat, and a low hum filled the air, not the roarer's roar but a new sound, like the crackle of a distant storm. The woman lunged, her dagger aimed at Clara's heart, but the air shimmered, and a gust of unnatural wind threw her back, her blade clattering against the stone. Lumen shouted, drawing his own dagger, but the hum grew louder, and the fissure erupted, spewing a cascade of light and smoke that formed a barrier between Clara and the keepers. Clara seized the moment, bolting through a side passage, her robes tearing on jagged stone. The undercroft was a maze of twisting corridors, their walls etched with faded runes that glowed faintly as she passed, as if the amulet were activating them. The hum followed, now a chorus of whispers, not words but emotions, a mix of sorrow and rage that she recognized as the roarers. Her mind flashed to Lucas' scream, the tendril that had taken him, and the prophecy's warning, "The roarer's freedom shall herald the storm." Had her actions doomed him, or was there still a chance to save him? The passage opened into a larger chamber, its ceiling arched like a cathedral, its walls lined with stone sarcophagi, their lids carved with apostles' faces frozen in anguish. At the center stood a massive altar, its surface etched with a spiral rune larger than any Clara had seen, its lines pulsing red. The amulet burned against her chest, its glow seeping through her robes, and the altar responded, its rune flaring brighter. Clara approached, her hands trembling, and saw a shallow groove in the altar, shaped perfectly for the amulet. The prophecy's choice bind or free loomed before her, a weight heavier than the stone around her. The keepers burst into the chamber, their daggers drawn, their runes glowing in response to the altar's light. The woman's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Place the amulet, or die." Clara's heart raced. The Rora's presence pressed against her mind, its sorrow and wrath a tidal wave. She could bind it, sealing the crypt with her blood, perhaps saving Luca if he was still alive. Or she could free it, trusting its tale of betrayal, risking the storm it promised. The altar's rune pulsed, the air crackling with energy, and the sarcophagi rattled, as if the apostles themselves were stirring. Clara raised the amulet, her bloodied finger brushing its surface, and the chamber erupted in a blinding flash. The altar cracked, the runes splitting, and a roar shook the undercroft, not from the roarer but from the earth itself. The keepers staggered, their runes flickering, and the sarcophagi burst open, releasing torrents of black smoke that formed shapes: wings, eyes, claws swirling around Clara. She pressed the amulet into the groove, and the chamber collapsed, stones falling as the floor gave way, swallowing her into darkness. Had she chosen the storm, or had the roarer chosen it for her? If you had one chance to stop an ancient force, what would you risk? Share your thoughts in the comments and hit that like button to uncover the next chapter of this saga. Chapter 13, The Abyss Opens. The darkness swallowed so Clara as the undercroft chamber collapsed, the roar of falling stone mingling with the fading echo of the roarer's chant. Her body ached, bruised from the impact, but the silver amulet remained clutched in her hand, its crescent shape pulsing with a warmth that felt like a second heartbeat. She lay sprawled on a jagged ledge, surrounded by a void so deep it seemed to breathe, its air thick with the stench of sulfur and ancient blood. The scroll, miraculously still tucked in her robes, pressed against her chest, its prophecy: the roarer's freedom shall herald the storm, now a reality she could no longer deny. The amulet's glow cast a faint light, revealing a cavernous abyss below, its walls shimmering with veins of crimson crystal that pulsed like arteries. Clara's breath came in shallow gasps, her cut finger throbbing as if answering the cavern's rhythm. The ritual in the chamber above had been her choice. She had pressed the amulet into the altar's groove, her blood sealing the act, but the consequences were unclear. Had she freed the roarer, or merely weakened its chains? The air vibrated with a low hum, not the chant from before but a deeper resonance, like the tolling of a bell in the earth's core. She struggled to her feet, her robes torn and heavy with dust, and scanned the ledge for a way out. The abyss yawned below, its depths lost in shadow, but faint shapes moved within, wisps of smoke forming wings, eyes, and claws that dissolved before she could focus. A narrow path wound along the cavern's wall, its surface slick with moisture that glistened red in the amulet's light. Clara followed it, her steps unsteady, the hum growing louder with each movement. The walls were etched with carvings, not of apostles but of primal figures, hooded shapes wielding blades, their hands stained with blood, surrounding a colossal entity with wings of shadow. The carvings seemed to pulse, their lines shifting as if alive, and Clara's heart quickened. These were older than the Vatican, older than Rome, a testament to a ritual that predated the church itself. The path led to a massive stone arch, its keystone carved with a spiral rune larger than any she'd seen, its crimson glow so intense it burned her eyes. Beyond it lay a chamber, its floor a mosaic of black and red tiles arranged in a spiral, at the center of which stood a sarcophagus of obsidian, its lid cracked and leaking black smoke. Clara approached, the amulet's heat surging, and saw a new inscription on the sarcophagus, its letters fresh and jagged, as if carved moments ago, "The chosen has come, and the storm shall rise." Her blood ran cold. The prophecy had spoken of her, and the roar's prison was breaking. The hum became a roar, not in her mind but in the air, shaking the chamber and sending cracked spider webbing across the sarcophagus. Clara clutched the amulet, its glow now blinding, and a vision flashed, not a memory or a future, but a presence. The roarer stood before her, its form a towering mass of shadow and light, its eyes twin infernos, its wings unfurling to blot out the cavern's glow. "Thou hast freed me," it said, its voice a thunder that rattled her bones. "The storm is born, and the heavens shall tremble." Clara staggered, the amulet burning her hand, and the sarcophagus shattered, releasing a torrent of smoke that formed a vortex, spiraling upward through the cavern ceiling. The abyss quaked, and Clara ran, the path crumbling behind her as the roarer's presence filled the air. She climbed a jagged staircase, its steps slick with crimson liquid, and emerged into St. Peter's Basilica, now a scene of chaos. The nave was fractured, its marble floor split by a massive fissure that bled black smoke. Pilgrims and clergy fled, their screams mingling with the wail of sirens outside. The dome above groaned, its frescoes cracking, and sunlight speared through shattered windows, illuminating the dust-choked air. Clara's heart sank. The roarer was free, and the Vatican was paying the price. She stumbled into the nave, the amulet still pulsing in her hand, and saw a new carving on the wall, a spiral rune, its lines etched with fresh blood, beside a prophecy: "The storm begins here, but its wrath shall spread." The words were not in Latin but in the same ancient script from the scroll, glowing as if written by the roarer itself. Clara's breath caught. The entity had vanished, but its presence lingered, a promise of greater horrors to come. Had she unleashed the storm, or was she merely its herald? What would you do if you unleashed a force that could destroy everything? Share your thoughts below and tap that subscribe button to follow the storm's next chapter. Chapter 14, The Dawn of Woe. The air in St. Peter's Basilica was choked with dust and the acrid stench of sulfur, the once sacred nave now a battlefield of fractured marble and shattered faith. So Clara stood frozen near the high altar, the silver amulet heavy in her hand, its crimson droplets dim but still warm, as if mourning the chaos she had unleashed. The prophecy's words, "The storm begins here, but its wrath shall spread," etched themselves into her mind, as vivid as the fresh carving on the basilica's wall, its spiral rune glowing faintly in the dawn's light. The roarer was gone, its towering form of shadow and light vanished into the abyss below, but the tremors shaking the Vatican had not ceased, and the screams of fleeing pilgrims echoed through the cracked dome above. Clara's robes were torn, her cut finger crusted with blood, and her heart ached with the weight of her actions. Lucas' scream, the custode's umbries pursued, and the roarer's sorrowful plea for freedom haunted her, each moment a thread in the tapestry of her guilt. The basilica's floor was split by a jagged fissure, leaking black smoke that curled like tendrils, whispering in a language she could no longer understand. The air felt heavy, not with the sanctity of prayer but with a primal dread, as if the stones themselves were bracing for what was to come. The prophecy had warned of a storm, and Clara feared she was its herald. She stumbled toward a side chapel, seeking refuge, but found only more ruin-shattered reliquaries, their contents spilled across the floor, and a fresco of Saint Peter, his keys now cracked, as if the saint had turned his back on Rome. A faint rustle drew her gaze, and she froze, spotting a small, leather-bound letter tucked beneath a fallen candelabrum. Its wax seal bore the spiral rune, and Clara's pulse quickened as she broke it open. The parchment was new, its ink fresh, written in a hurried hand. The roarer has fled to the city of 7 hills beyond the sea. The storm follows, and the chosen must pursue, or all shall fall. The letter was unsigned, but its words carried a weight that felt like a command or a curse. The basilica quaked again, a deep rumble that sent shards of stained glass raining down, their colors scattering like blood across the marble. Clara tucked the letter into her robes, next to the amulet, and moved toward the nave's exit, her steps unsteady. The dawn's light streamed through the broken dome, illuminating a world unraveling. Clergy knelt in frantic prayer, pilgrims fled toward St. Peter's Square, and sirens wailed in the distance, their sound drowned by a new noise, a low, guttural roar, not from the abyss but from the sky, echoing across Rome like a distant thunderclap. Clara emerged into the square, the morning air cold against her skin, and saw chaos unfolding. The obelisk at the center tilted, its base cracked, and crowds surged, their voices a cacophony of fear and confusion. She glanced back at the basilica, its facade marred by fissures, and felt the amulet pulse, as if urging her to follow the letter's call. The roarer was free, no longer bound beneath the Vatican, and its wrath had moved beyond Rome. The prophecy's new carving burned in her mind, the storm shall spread. She recalled the roarer's voice, its tale of betrayal and compassion, and wondered if she had freed a savior or a destroyer. A shadow passed overhead, not a cloud but something vast, its edges indistinct, moving swiftly toward the horizon. Clara's breath caught, her hand tightening around the amulet. The letter's words, the city of 7 hills beyond the sea, pointed to a new destination, perhaps Lisbon, or Jerusalem, cities steeped in their own ancient secrets. The roar sounded again, fainter now, but unmistakable, a call that seemed to pull at her very soul. She crossed herself, whispering a prayer, but it felt hollow, drowned by the weight of her choice. As she slipped through the panicked crowd, a final tremor shook the square, and Clara glanced back to see a new crack split the basilica's wall, revealing a glimpse of the abyss below, its depths alive with crimson light. The roarer was gone, but something else stirred in its wake, a second woe, promised by the prophecy, waiting to rise. Clara's heart pounded, her path clear but terrifying. She had to follow the roarer, to confront the storm she had unleashed, or the world would pay the price. Where do you think the roarer has fled, and what new horrors await? Share your theories in the comments and tap that share button to spread this apocalyptic tale.